The Gold Coast of West Africa, 1876. Once ruled by the mighty Asante Confederation, whose kings held sway from the sea, across the great forests, and into the savanna of the West African interior. The Asante kings were defeated by the British and their allies, a coalition of coastal chiefs and urbanized Africans, in a great war between 1873 and 1874, and pushed back from the coast. Now the Gold Coast is ruled by the British, who have divided it into the coastal strip known as the colony and the technically independent but subordinate chiefdoms of the protectorate. The biggest prize won by the British is control over local trade. Once this meant gold and enslaved humans. Now, however, the gold trade has dried up, while Britain has turned from the world's largest slave trading state into an abolitionist power. The new gold is palm oil, harvested in the Gold Coast and vital to the functioning of Britain's growing industrial production. Slavery has been abolished throughout the British Empire, a rule extended to the Gold Coast in 1874. Yet, ironically, the demand for laborers on the growing palm oil plantations and in the houses of those who own them means that the trade in slaves into the Gold Coast does not dry up following the war. Instead, even after 1874, large numbers of children are imported into the colony as workers. Deemed less likely to run away or seek their liberation in British courts, children, especially girls, are seen as desirable slaves. This is the story of one such child, a young girl enslaved in her youth. Captured during a war and enslaved in Asante, she was brought to the town of Salt Pond in the Gold Coast Protectorate, where she ended up in the household of a wealthy man named Kwamina Adu. It is here that our story begins. Abina awakens.
This is my chance while they sleep. I will not work for Kwamina anymore. I will not let Ekwa call me a slave. And I will not marry Tando. They say that in Cape Coast, all are free.
Cape Coast, 1876. Once an independent African city-state, but now the leading city of the British Gold Coast colony. Here, the houses of the rich palm oil merchants, small-time market traders, and struggling workers are all dominated by the seat of government, Cape Coast Castle.
Brother, can you help me?
I don't have time. This isn't the bush, you know. I have to stack this fruit or I won't get paid.
Over here. I can see you're not from around here. Are you lost, daughter, or did you run away?
I've come here to be free, Auntie.
Oh, then you'll need papers from the magistrate. You can't just approach him. He is an important man. You must find someone to help you. Do you know anyone here?
No, Auntie.
Then listen quickly. This isn't the bush. If the police find you wandering around, they can put you in prison. And there are worse things. Men who would take a girl like you and ruin you.
I thought everyone here was free.
What is free? You can get a piece of paper saying you're free, and then you can leave any time you want. But the British don't want you here if you don't have a job and a place to stay. You must find a place to belong.
Then I will find one. Can you help me?
Well, I know of someone who works for the British. He too is an important man. Maybe he can help you with a job and help you get your papers as well.
What is it you want from me?
I have come to this town from a house where I was a slave, and I'm a flefle. And now I want to take care of myself and run my own life.
A young girl like you can't run her own life. The British are doing their best to civilize this place with the help of men like me. It isn't civilized to let girls run around free, doing whatever they want, is it?
But the other girls told me that all are free now, and that the British would put my master and mistress in prison if they found out what they had done to me.
Well, it's true that there is no legal slavery here in Cape Coast or throughout the colony and protectorate. But look, the government doesn't have the money or the ability to enforce the law everywhere. Come now, girl. Don't cry. I need someone to help out around here. You can be my maid and make a little money. And stay here. So long as you never leave Cape Coast, you should be safe from your master.
And so Abina had a place in Cape Coast and was no longer a slave. She was poor, but she had food and a place to live and friends. But then one day, Kwamina Adu, her old master.
What is it?
I've seen my old master. He's here. He'll steal me away. You must help me.
Abina, there's nothing I can do. Kwamina Adu is an important man, and the British do not like alienating important men. Don't look at me like that. Even if the magistrate agreed to hear the case, you'd have to face him in court, yourself. And you have no idea what that means.
Please, Mr. Davis.
Are you sure you want to do this?
I'm sure.
Very well. We can sit down and write a paper to submit to the magistrate, Mr. Melton. But I can promise nothing. Written this 21st day of October, 1876. I, Abina Mansa, a woman of Asante, do hereby attest the following.
That I was unlawfully enslaved by Kwamina Adu of Salt Pond in the Gold Coast Colony and Protectorate. That I was brought against my will from Adansi, outside the Gold Coast Colony and Protectorate. That I was sold by Yao Awoa, a man of Asante, to Kwamina Adu. That I was told that I must marry Tando, a man of Kwamina Adu's household, against my will, and that I was told I would be flogged if I did not.
Mark of Abina Mansa, hereby witnessed by James Davis, court interpreter, Cape Coast Superior Court.
You've never taken an interest in these cases before, Davis. What's so special about this one?
She came to me, sir, and convinced me that this was right. She's only a girl, and she's scared out of her wits.
But you put me in a bad position. On the one hand, Her Majesty has outlawed slavery, and especially the importation of slaves from Asante. On the other hand, we don't want to stir things up. We can't afford to have slave owners becoming angry with us. Not when things are so stirred up still from the last war. Moreover, men like Kwamina Adu grow palm oil, and palm oil is taxed. And those taxes pay your salary, and in the long run, mine as well. This is simply too big.
Sir, when I was a child, I knew nothing of Britain or of Christianity. But my father sent me to school to become a Christian. And then I came to know everything Britain stands for, including the abolition of slavery. Surely, if the British stand for righteousness, we should at least give the girl her trial.
Very well. I'll need a constable to find this Kwamina Adu. His plantation isn't far away. Nothing else, this child can have her day in court. I'll send Constable Musa to bring him in. That's his district.
And so, a few days later, at the compound of Kwamina Adu.
Constable Musa, my friend. How good to see you.
Kwamina, you shouldn't be happy to see me today. I'm here to take you in on account of that girl who ran away from you. The charges are bringing the girl into the protectorate and keeping her as your slave.
What? Abina? But you know how well I treated her. She had no right to run away. She's only a girl, and a creppy at that. And now she's taking me to court? How can they even listen to that girl? What's wrong with these British?
I don't understand them either. But the fact is, most of them don't really care about this too much. Look, all you need is a good lawyer anyway, and he'll get you off. As for me, I have to follow orders. So go collect your stuff, and we'll go into town.
Tondo, get your traveling bag. You're coming with me. Ekwa, you're in charge of the field hands while I'm away. Lock the girls in at night. We can't have them thinking they can run away too.
Don't worry, my brother. You can count on me. I'll make sure they don't follow in the footsteps of that little slave.
The home of James Hutton Brew, descendant of Scottish traders and African chiefs, an educated man, a Christian, and a sometime employee of the colonial government. He's one of the few trained lawyers in Ura.
I tell you, James, if I knew they were going to outlaw slavery, I would never have supported the British in the war against Asante. At the time, they promised just to be our allies, but since then, they have somehow forced us to agree to their laws and to pay taxes to them.
Well, you have to blame the Ahenfo, the chiefs. One moment they say they're going to fight alongside the British allies, and the next they agree to follow all these laws. I guess it's because they're afraid of Asante, but I hear some of them are accepting salaries and gifts from the British. But for whatever reason, the fact is that your chief, like the others, agreed that slavery is outlawed, and the British courts can try anyone who keeps a slave.
What can I do?
Don't worry. We have ways of getting around these laws. For example, you could claim she was your wife or your daughter or even an apprentice. Or you could say that you didn't know about the laws. A girl from the bush like Abina doesn't know how to speak in court, so you don't need to worry. She doesn't know that a magistrate like William Melton will make his decision based on 4 factors. First, did she see money change hands?
No. I gave it to Ya'awoa in my chamber.
Then that's not a problem. Second, did you call her a slave?
I don't even know. She wasn't really around me much. I put her to work in my sister Ekwa's house.
Did she beat her? More than you might normally beat a child. I mean, even the British know that children sometimes need to be corrected a bit.
I don't think so. I remember we said she would get a beating if she didn't marry my man Tondo, to whom I promised her. But she ran away first.
Then that should be fine. And final question. Did you give her work in the field? The British still think of slaves in the sense of field workers.
No. She just did chores around the house.
Well then, my friend, I think you'll be all right. Just let me take the lead in court tomorrow. I know how to speak Melton's language.
The next morning, in the courtroom of Magistrate William Melton.
The case before us today is the Queen versus Kwamina Adu, who was accused of enslavement of Abina Mansa in contravention of Gold Coast Ordinance 1 of 1874. Who brings these charges?
I do.
Me.
Mr. Davis, instruct your witness that she cannot bring this charge. Even you are only acting as prosecutor on forbearance of the court.
Sorry, sir.
All right. Proceed with your case.
The prosecution calls to the stand Abina Mansa. Abina, tell us how you came to be in Kwamina Adu's household and how you come to be here today.
I don't remember much of my childhood. I was born in Kripe, in Eweland. What I can remember of my young childhood is cooking with my mother, making fufu. I had many brothers and sisters. Then there was a war. And I remember that a general named Adu Bafo captured me. I lived with him until he sold me to another man in Adansi province.
As a slave?
I suppose you would say that. But we said Adanko in the Sante language, or Emeflefle in Ewe, which means someone who is bought. Then there was another war, and I was stolen again, and sold to a man named Ya'awoa. He told me I was married to him, and that as his wife, I would help him to carry goods for sale in the British colony.
What did you carry and to where?
We took palm kernels from the forest to the coast, to Salt Pond, and then we carried salt back to the forest. It was hard work, but I was happy enough with him. Then one day we dropped a load at Salt Pond. Ya'awoa went on to purchase more goods. He told me to stay with the man named Kwamina Adu.
The defendant?
Yes, although he said he would come back for me. Then he cut the beads off of me. Beads he had given me when he bought me. When he married me at the same time. He said he was only going away for a short time. And then he wanted the beads to remember me by. But I suspected it wasn't true. But about 10 days after, Kwamina Adu gave me 2 cloths and told me that he had given me in marriage to one of his house people.
Put on these cloths I have brought for you, girl, so that you may go to your new husband, Tondo, a clothed woman.
How can you give me to Tondo? I do not belong to you. I'm a married woman already.
Silly woman. You are no longer married to Yaowa. He has sold you to me, and I can do with you what I want.
Then my heart was torn. I had finally been born to a family, and then enslaved in a war, twice. When things were darkest, Yaowa had bought me and made me his wife, and things were better. But now I knew for sure he had lied to me and sold me. I was a slave once more.
What is this about cloths and beads? Can you explain?
The people of the bush have a custom that the giving of cloth signifies belonging. A father gives cloth to a child, or a husband to a wife, or even a master to a servant. This is why women who own stalls in the marketplace buy their own cloth, and lots of it, to show they're independent. When Yaowawa cut the witnesses' old beads away, and then Kwamina Adu gave her new cloth, they were telling her that she belonged to Adu now. Maybe also some of the cloth was from Tondo, as he was to be her husband, and so she was to belong to him as well.
Yes, but as you say, the giving of cloth doesn't necessarily indicate slavery. In fact, as my client will testify, gifts of cloth are often given to guests. If this had been a case of slavery, other ceremonies would have been observed. Abina, you've seen how slaves are sold, right? Are there usually ceremonies when they are handed over?
Yes.
Were any of these observed when you were allegedly sold to Adu?
The only thing that was done was the cutting of the beads.
Did you see money change hands? Did Yaowa get paid for you?
I did not see it.
There, you see? This cloth and beads thing has nothing to do with slavery.
Just because she did not see it means nothing. Everyone knows that such payments are illegal, so they do it away from the eyes of witnesses.
Yet if there's no evidence that money changed hands, how are we to know whether she was a slave or not? Perhaps if I question the girl directly, I can make some sense of her claim. Tell me, girl, what work did you do in Kwamina Adu's house?
I was not in Kwamina's house. I was in his sister, Ekwa's house. But I did work for her from the day I began there. I was sent for firewood and water, and to market. When I cooked, I could eat some of what I cooked, but I ate last. Once I went to wash clothes, and when I came back, they had eaten, and there was no food for me.
A slave like you must go and wash clothes and then come back and cook for yourself. I do not do such things, nor does your master.
What did she mean, your master?
I cannot answer.
Sir, the word is difficult to translate. In our language, the word we use for master can mean just about any important man.
All right. But during these times, you were with Ekwa and Kwamina Adu. Were you compelled to work against your will?
What does it mean, against your will?
He means, were you forced to do the work, or did you choose to do it?
These questions are mad. I was the least person in the household. I did what I had to. How am I supposed to answer this man? In some instances, she told me to do so, and I did it. Other times, I acted of my own accord.
Gentlemen, I cannot determine from the girl's answers whether she was a slave or free. Certainly, she thought herself a slave, but I do not count this as too important. Without proof of money changing hands, I must rely on philosophy, and our philosophers tell us that the question of free will is at the heart of the question of slavery. Yet this girl cannot understand such a complex concept. Thus tomorrow I must turn the questioning over to you to see what evidence you can elicit from her.
Later that night.
I don't understand. She said herself she didn't see money change hands, and that she didn't do any work in the fields. Why isn't this over already?
It's because of Davis. He understands the way the British work because he spent so much time around the courts.
Well, I don't understand. Can you explain it to me?
Listen, men like Melton aren't trained attorneys. They're just middle-ranking bureaucrats who get put into positions as magistrates because there are so few Europeans over here to serve in those positions, and they won't let Africans hold them anymore. So they base the decisions on 3 kinds of factors. First, they have those questions I told you about earlier. Did money exchange hands? Was the child a slave, etc.? Second, they bring with them from Britain certain ideas. Like there are laws in Britain now about what jobs children can work and how much you can beat a child. So as long as you're conforming to those rules, you're probably okay. I mean, an apprentice in London isn't much different from a domestic slave here. In fact, there are many similarities between our cultures. Just as here in the Protectorate, the fathers in Britain make rules for the family and everyone else follows. It's not like it used to be around here in our grandfathers' days when women were powerful, like they still are in some states of the interior. But the British also have some crazy ideas about African societies. For example, they misunderstand the gifts we give when we get married, and thus they believe we buy our wives. It follows that there are 2 basic strategies for beating an accusation of slavery. First, convince them that the slave is an apprentice, or second, convince them that the girl was purchased as a wife. That, of course, is why young girls are the safest and best slaves to own. That and the fact that they find it hard to run away and are easily intimidated.
That's what I thought. Until this one.
The next morning.
Mr. Brew, as a child of Europe and of Africa, you are the bridge across our societies. I hope you can help me to understand what happened and what is going on in this girl's mind.
I surely will, sir. Girl, I will now ask you questions and you must answer me truthfully.
Why must I answer your questions? Are you a judge like the white man in the seat? Why are you always sitting with my former master?
You must answer what I ask you truthfully because it's the law. That's all you need to know. Now, do you know what the truth is?
I only tell the truth. Ask your questions.
Very well. First, were there any other women in the house of the defendants besides yourself?
Yes.
And did they do the same kind of work as you?
Yes.
But then where are they today? Why are they not testifying against Mr. Adu? Isn't it true that they're not here today because they're all free, just as you were when you lived in that house? You knew you were free, didn't you?
I did not know it.
Are you aware that everybody in the Protectorate is free and that those people you saw in the defendant's house are as free as the defendant or Mr. Davis or I?
Many of the people living in that house are children of slaves.
Maybe, but they were not slaves themselves, were they?
They were not all free. Some were slaves.
But slavery is outlawed, so they could not have been slaves. Therefore, they were all free, were they not?
I know they were all free, but they were not free.
I object. Counsel is trying to trick the witness by purposefully confusing the legal status of free with the condition of freedom. One can be legally free while still technically enslaved.
Objection overruled.
Thank you. Let us proceed. You say you were not aware that all slaves in the Protectorate had been declared free? What then led you to come here and complain about being a slave?
I heard that white man had said all are free, yet I had been sold, and I had no will of my own and could not look after my body and health. Therefore, I knew I was a slave, and so I decided I would come here and complain.
Miss Abina, you cannot yell out like that in court. Mr. Davis, you must control your client.
I'm sorry, Mr. Melton. It won't happen again.
Perhaps we could get back to questioning the witness. I intend to prove my client's innocence by the end of the day. You said earlier that there were other girls in the house besides you and Ekwa.
Yes. met them soon after I arrived. 4 young girls, just like me. Their names were Akosua, Abina, like me, Ajua, and Amba. Amba was the oldest of the girls.
Listen, new girl, you must learn to get along here. Things aren't so bad if you do what they tell you.
During the day, Ekwa and the master sent us to do work, mostly cleaning, cooking, and gathering water and firewood. We worked hard to keep our minds busy. But at night, sometimes we cried. One of us would start, and then the others. Akosua is only 9. Amba is maybe 13. We are just children away from our families.
Children, yes, but not slaves. These girls were just apprentices, weren't they? And were you not just passing through?
I know we were slaves.
How? How do you know that?
At Adansi, where I was a slave before, when a free person was sitting down at ease, the slave had to keep working. It was the same in Kwamana Adu's house. That is how I know we were slaves.
But life in Kwamana Adu's house was not the same as in Adansi, was it? In Adansi, were you not beaten?
In Adansi, I was beaten many times. I was flogged by my master. And once I was logged.
What does this mean, logged?
It's a custom in Asante. The civilized people of the colony never do it, of course. It means being imprisoned to a log for a long period of time or chained to one. You have told us that you were beaten in Adansi, but once you were at Kwamina Adu's house, you were never beaten. Is that true?
Neither Kwamina Adu nor his sister beat me, but they did threaten to do so.
When did this happen?
When I refused to marry Tondo, it happened like this. It was about 10 days after Yao Awoa had left for Asante.
Abina, I must talk to you. Yao Awoa has left you here and gone away. You are all alone now, and everyone knows that a woman's glory is her marriage. You must be married again. Tondo is a good man. He will take good care of you.
Yes, it will be good with me, little one. You will learn to like me, and I will be a good husband. I will even obey the customs of our ancestors. You see, I give you this cloth, the first gift of many. If your father and mother were here, I would give them gifts as well.
No, Tondo. I have already given her cloth for you. As you once were my slave, and she still is. She will marry you because I tell her to do so.
But I do not like him.
You will learn to like him.
No, I am married to Yao Awoa. I will wait for him to return.
You are not married to him in any of the customs of your country or ours.
I am his woman. He made me so on the trip down from Asante.
You are a slave girl. Sleeping with you is not a promise, but merely a convenience.
About an hour later, 2 men of the household, Senege and Ata, came to me.
Girl, why don't you do what the master asks of you? Don't you know that he can make your life happy or sad at a whim?
I will not marry Tondo. I will not be made to marry anyone. I'm sick of being told what to do.
Well, don't you know the master has told me to deal with you? Well, if you don't marry Tondo, I will beat you with all of my might. And I will keep doing it until you agree to marry him.
It was then that I decided I had to leave.
It's 3 o'clock. We will break for now to resume on Monday. Counselors, if you will join me in my chambers, we can discuss whether there might be more evidence to collect still. Gentlemen, this case concerns me. Thank you, James. Please do sit. You too, Mr. Davis. You're not just the interpreter this time, but an officer of the court, like James and I. Now, I find myself in a bind. On the one hand, Her Majesty's government is interested in maintaining the peace and stability of this colony. The war against Asante was very expensive, and we cannot afford the kind of upheaval that we would cause by going around liberating slaves. On the other hand, we must enforce the rules of civilization. These include a prohibition against slave trading.
Ironic, since the British were not too long ago the biggest slave traders of them all.
A trade your family was happy to participate in, James? It bought you your nice houses and fine education, didn't it? Whereas we, as you know, were the first major country to ban the slave trade in 1807 and to eliminate slavery in all of our colonies in 1834. But that is distant history, and I would rather remind you of more recent events. When we defeated the Asante 2 years ago, Britain became the major power in this region. By law, we had to eliminate slavery in our new colony and protected territories. Yet we cannot totally overturn your society by going around taking the enslaved workers from the fields and homes, especially in terms of strategic trade, like the trade in palm oil. Thus, gentlemen, we have the situation we're in today. Legally, there is no slavery in the colony and the protectorate. Yet as magistrates, my peers and I do not go out to actively try to find slaves and liberate them. It's a delicate balance.
If I may, Mr. Melton, that is what makes this case so dangerous. There are thousands of young girls out there working in the houses and fields of the protectorate. They are not slaves, but rather under the protection of the important men to whom they have been entrusted by parents or as orphans. If they thought they could run away to the city anytime they wanted and could sue their guardians for any little beating or being made to work, there would be chaos.
I don't necessarily see it that way. The question here is one of civilization and progress. Educated men like Mr. Brew and I know to thank the British for bringing to us knowledge of the one true God and of the way civilized people act. I myself have not only read the Bible, but also briefly the work of John Locke and other great Englishmen. The British are a great power, protecting us, their children. In this case, you are being asked to protect a particular young girl from the savagery of an outdated system and a cruel man.
Wait. We will not argue this out here. I need a good night's sleep to think my way through this problem. Be prepared to hear from me tomorrow.
The next morning.
Why is it that you don't mind cooking for me, but you ran away from being a servant at Kwamina Adu's?
Did you not hear what I was saying in court yesterday? It was never the work. I understand that we all must work. It wasn't even the beatings. I'm used to such things. It was not being in control of my own life, not being able to care for myself, to decide whom I wanted to marry. These are the things I could no longer take.
The problem is that these aren't the things that matter to the magistrate. They don't stand up in court, you see, because they aren't part of his definition of slavery.
So you think we're not doing well?
Actually, I think we're doing surprisingly well. Melton has been more open to our arguments than I thought he would be. But I don't know how he's going to decide. Here, get the door, would you?
Mr. Davis.
Constable Munchie.
I'm sent here to give you the official court paper.
Thank you. You may go.
What is it?
It's a note telling me of several decisions Mr. Melton has made. First, he is going to call a jury of 11 local dignitaries to help him make a decision. The document he has given me says this.
Because this case is tightly wrapped up in issues of local custom, I find it necessary to bring together a jury to advise me in my decision.
Will any of these people be like me?
Do you mean girls? No. To be a member of the jury, you must speak English well. You must own land or have money. And above all, you must be a man. But there's a second part of the document. In order to gather more evidence, I am requesting that the following people
appear in court voluntarily. 2 men of the household of Kwamina Adu, namely Ata and Senege, and the girls Akusa, Ajua, Abina, and Amba.
This is good for us, isn't it?
It's mixed. I don't think this jury will be sympathetic. Too many of them are slave owners or have friends who are. But perhaps the testimony of these witnesses can help us out.
Monday morning in court.
Good morning. I'd like to finish the case today. Mr. Brew, do you have any additional witnesses to present?
I'm afraid that none of the girls could be rounded up this quickly, and the two men are away carrying palm oil for Mr. Adu.
Your Honor, their testimony is relevant to proving how Abina was treated. Therefore, I request that we hold over this case until they arrive.
Your Honor, my client is an important man. He has been unable to carry out his business for almost a week now. Moreover, there are many other cases that need to come before the court.
Very well. We'll proceed without the witnesses. Mr. Brew, can we see whether we can clear up the remaining details?
Abina, can you come answer more questions? Now, you previously told the court that you were not paid for your work.
Yes, I heard that in this place when a person worked in any way, that person got paid. But I worked and I was never paid. This is one reason I knew I was a slave.
But you were given cloth and fed.
2 cloths were given to me. That is all. I was fed by Equa.
I see. Were you also told that people are paid and fed and clothed for their work?
I don't know. I'm confused.
In fact, it's pretty obvious that you were paid in cloth and food. Is this not a custom in our country? Is cloth not often used as money? Good. Now there's one final issue I'd like to resolve. Abina, these other girls in the household, did they get paid?
I do not know. If they were here, they could answer.
Tell us what you know.
They had clothes and food given to them. They were not paid.
But then they were not being treated as slaves either. They were being compensated, weren't they? I repeat the question. They were not being treated as slaves, were they?
Since they were in Kwamana Adu's house long before, if he did anything for them, I do not know. But as he did nothing good for me, I ran away.
Well, I believe we've spent enough time on this witness, and it appears some of our other witnesses have arrived. The court calls Equa Cum.
How do you know Abina Mansa?
I met her at my husband's house. He said his friend had left her until he returned and asked me to care for her.
How long did she stay with you?
I did not reckon.
Did you send her for firewood?
No.
Did you treat her as a guest, a servant, or a slave?
She ate together with me.
Did you never call her slave?
I do not remember calling her so.
Did your brother give her to Tondo to be a wife?
I do not know. I always treated her as a guest, not a slave. And anything she did for me, she did of her own accord, without any coercion of any kind.
The court calls Ajua Nwamawa.
I was a slave in Asante with Abina. I knew her there. I saw her purchased by Yao Awawa as a slave. He married her at the same time. Then I saw her when she arrived in Salt Pond.
Do you know that she was a slave?
Yes, because one day I saw Yao without her. I asked where she was, and he said she was in Kwamana Adu's house because he had sold her to him. Later, Abina came to me. She was crying and said that her husband had sold her and gone away to Asante. I know these things to be true. I am certain of them.
The court calls Yao Awawa.
I come from Adansi. Abina is my wife. I did not buy her as a slave, but rather paid bride price. We call it head price to marry her.
Why did you leave Abina with Kwamina Adu?
I heard my brother was dying in Asante, so I had to go. I asked Adu to watch her while I was gone. I said to him, "Friend, this is my wife. I leave her with you. Take care of her for me. When I return, I will take my wife away with me."
Tell the court the truth. Didn't you cut the beads from me? Didn't I have to ask you whether you had sold me to Adu?
Nothing of the sort happened.
He is lying. He cannot dare say he did not sell me. I don't have anything else to ask him, but I know he sold me.
Well, we have exhausted our witness list. At this time, court is adjourned so that I may confer with the jury. We will announce our verdict tomorrow.
Do you think we have a chance?
I don't know. It was a pretty mean trick to pull, keeping the other witnesses away. And the jury doesn't seem sympathetic to us. But I must believe we can rely on English justice.
All day, all over the Gold Coast colony and protectorate, people go about their business. They do so with the help of numerous enslaved children. Every day, more and more are brought in from outside the protectorate. They are carriers, domestic workers, net haulers on the fishing boats. English justice was supposed to eliminate slavery, but instead it has just shifted it onto the backs of children, who have become safer slaves to own than adults. The case before Magistrate Melton could impact all of them, but for one young woman, it's personal. It's about her own story, her own suffering, and her own justice. And who is this group of important men? What do they know of suffering, of freedom? Thomas Amanissa, a landowner and leading member of the Wesleyan Methodist congregation.
It is our duty, of course, to free the slaves. Our beloved leader, John Wesley, tells us that. However, dumping these young girls onto the streets to become vagrants does no favors to them or to anyone else. In the absence of evidence that she was mistreated, it seems to me that Kwamina Adu acted much like a father to that girl. Did he not feed her and clothe her? Certainly he disciplined her, but was she not disobedient?
Jonathan Dawson, a trader in palm oil, son of a British merchant, and grandson of a chief.
I'm not sure that he was a wonderful father. A bit rough with her, perhaps. But have you considered the chilling effect of punishing a man like Kwamina Adu? If just any unhappy worker can accuse their employer of slavery, what will it do to our young economy? If the growers are afraid of taking on any young laborers, who will do the work? Who will grow the palms and crush the oil? Trade will stagnate, and this country will fail to modernize.
Nana Ampofa, a leading chief of the protectorate.
I am not so much worried about the modernization as tradition. Since my grandfather's time, at least, important men have taken unto our households the orphans, the poor, and the wanderers. They are not slaves, but they are our dependents. Their labor is necessary for the smooth functioning of the household, of the clan, and eventually of the state.
The point we are making, Magistrate, is that we all agree with you that slavery is a bad thing. Many of the advisors you turn to are in fact abolitionists, like me. But you must be very careful here. You must neither upset the development of our country toward modernization, nor our deep traditions.
If there were clear evidence of slavery, money changing hands perhaps, or gross violence, it would be different. But as it stands, we advise you to acquit the defendant.
History must not judge William Melton too harshly. He believed strongly in doing what was right. But what did right mean? Melton's idea of right and wrong had been formed over many years and through many experiences. In school, as a child, he had read of the great Enlightenment philosophies of free work and free will, and he was guided by the teaching of his church, by his pastors, and by his own reading of the Bible. He was taught that British values were righteous, and that English civilization should guide the development of all the world, not only because Britain had helped to abolish the slave trade, but also because of some innate superiority over other peoples. Finally, years of working in Africa had mingled this sense of superiority with a respect for the rules of other cultures as he understood them. Yet Melton had two great weaknesses that allowed him to be easily manipulated by powerful local men. First, he believed that he understood local cultures, even though he had only scratched their surface. Second, his own success in his chosen career was determined by the stability of the Gold Coast colony and protectorate, which in turn was in the hands of slave-owning men, some of whom sat on the jury. He knew he had to please them. Still, William Melton was at least nominally an abolitionist. He had great sympathy, if nothing else, for Abina Mansa. But in the end, that wasn't enough.
Abina, can you stop for a moment? We need to talk.
What is it?
This morning, Mr. Melton found Kwamina Adu not guilty.
What? How did this happen?
I asked him to at least try Yao for illegally selling you as a slave, but he said the evidence was too weak and refused to do it.
Yao? He just sat in that chair and lied. What kind of husband would sell his wife? What kind of man would lie about it?
Abina, stop. Melton has rendered his decision. It's over. Look, you needn't fear anything. You are safe here. You have a job and friends and a place to live. And Kwamina will never be able to touch you. Not now.
You don't understand. It was never just about being safe. It was about being heard. I went to court so that I could say what needed to be said, so that they would hear how my life was, so that they could hear that I was a good woman, a virtuous wife, but was sold as a slave. But now, I know that no one heard me. Now I know that I might as well have kept silent.
Philosopher and historian Michel Roth-Trouillot says that history is an act of silencing, in which those without power are silenced, and those with power are able to speak. This silencing takes place in 4 stages. First, only some perspectives on the past are ever recorded as documents. Others, the perspectives of the poor, the powerless, the illiterate, are never heard. Second, only some documents ever make it to be archived. Others are lost to decay or consigned to the trash. Third, only some archived material is ever turned into histories by historians who decide what is important enough to write about and what isn't. Finally, only some histories are chosen by the powerful to be in the canon, the list of great books and important topics that are widely read. Following her testimony, the book was closed on the story of Abina Mansa for 125 years. She was indeed silenced by history, as if nobody had heard her at all. Kwamina Adu appears only intermittently in the historical records of the time. But there are plenty of documents from his lawyer James Hutton Brew, and even articles and books about him. The same is true of William Melton. Much of the history of the Gold Coast is written about and by men like Brew and Davis and Melton, for they are important men. But not Abina Mansa. She appears in only one place, a document detailing the case she brought against her master and setting out her testimony. For 125 years, her testimony was hidden on a shelf, and her voice was silent. Bits of her case were even lost at times. But a voice like hers cannot be silenced forever. And one day, not too long ago,